The UK is in an immigration crisis, and here's how it can be stopped sensibly, strategically, and definitively.
Just under 10 years ago, the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. And what was, among other things, a decision to halt immigration. Since then, the new arrivals to Britain have not stopped. And the desire from the British public to see immigration stopped and deportations begin means that for the first time since the 1920s, a party that isn't either Conservative or Labour will likely enter office.
Most reliable data metrics support Reform UK winning the next election, and likely as a majority. Their mandate will be to stop immigration. Though this isn't the first time in Britain or Europe a populist party has been elected to stop immigration, for many that are concerned with both immigration and have an awareness of the machinations of political power, the change we are hoping for may not be on the way. The Tory government of 2019 betrayed the nation and imported upwards of 3 million migrants. Maloney's Italy has hardly seen major decrease in the presence of migrants, and even the often lauded fascist America of Donald Trump, not a lot has been done.
Now, all of this is to say is that essentially any populist right-wing party winning an election will not mean that there will be an end to immigration or any of the issues they were elected to solve. These slopulists, basically politicians that use public energy to get into power, but have no desire to actually implement any change, get our votes through these big promises and clever rhetoric. However, when in power, they have no strategy and the solutions to carry out any change. They're not like the Blair government of 97 that actually did large, long-lasting change. They have no clear ideas, and they're just blockaded by these legislative and bureaucratic obstacles in place to prevent change to the system, stopping the policies they were voted in to carry out from ever being done. Thus, it's one thing to say that we have to stop immigration and deport them, but another to actually carry it out. Doing so requires creativity and a careful dance through legal hurdles. That's why the solutions we lay out will work under the premise of realistic political conditions. These are not necessarily what we would do if granted total power. Instead, they are ways of carrying out desired policy in a way that does not overstretch the messaging and capabilities of a democratically elected British party. These can be done, in essence, within the system as it is, thus negating the need for an overhaul that, let's be honest, is unlikely to happen.
And so luckily we have the solutions. And in this video, we want to essentially lay out a playbook for the UK government to deal with the migrant problem definitively. Stopping and removing immigrants are both keys to a successful UK government. We'll show you how the UK can, number one, stop arrivals, number two, deport migrants, and number three, simultaneously create an environment to deter and initiate remigration. We'll cover each of these processes in their own sections. We must emphasize, however, that this video should not be taken as a white pill. We strongly believe these solutions would work. However, whether reform or anyone actually goes through with them is a completely different story. So don't take this as a sign that change is coming. Instead, see this video as a way of understanding how meaningful change can come about. Please as well put your suggestions to stopping immigration in the comments below. We'd love to read them, but remember to logically test them out and make sure that it actually work in the system, as my colleague said, and not needed a complete overhaul to the UK government and the UK system. As mentioned, these policies have to actually work under normal political conditions. The base takeover has not happened yet.
So logically, the first thing to do is stop arrivals. And to achieve that, the UK needs full sovereignty in its ability to enact law. What we're meaning to say is that we need to exit or move around the numerous legal obstacles that are enabling immigrants to enter the country in the first place. You see, besides the Boris wave, most recent arrivals are actually entering under the false pretext of asylum. What's forcing Britain to accept these asylum claims, many of them bogus, are a plethora of outdated and foreign laws. Now, you might be familiar with these, but the main two are the 1951 Refugee Act and the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights Treaty, which merges into the British 1998 Human Rights Treaty. Now, a good case study of this is in 2022 to 23, when the Tory government created the Nationality Act and the Legal Immigration Act, aiming to stop arrivals. However, these just didn't work because of these previously mentioned treaties, which blocked all the policy that would essentially stop anyone coming in. Thus, the huge issue in stopping arrivals and enacting deportations lies in the UK achieving legal sovereignty. The obvious solution then is to leave these institutions, but not quite.
Firstly, it simply take too long. Think how long it took to exit the European Union. It wouldn't be too dissimilar with these processes, plus it would willingly exit a UN treaty outright. Secondly, the ECHR is heavily tied into the Good Friday Agreement. And with the threat of tension there never going away, it would be unsensible to leave the treaty altogether. The solutions we are then suggesting are as such. First is selective acknowledgement. The British government simply abide by the policies of the ECHR and UN Refugee Act that it wants. It then ignores the parts of the conventions that enable infinite arrivals. This is more feasible than initially stated. Trump's America has ignored parts of the UN Refugee Act, and countless countries ignore UN charters all the time. Sure, it wouldn't portray Britain favourably in globalist media, but no country is going to start sanctioning or resorting to hard power enforcement if Britain adopts a common sense policy. The same goes for the ECHR. The treaty has some things that most people agree with, like not torturing prisoners and stuff to that avail. I'm sure we'd be happy to keep that. But the parts of the treaty that enable arrivals can again just be ignored. Hungary, Poland, and other EU states within the ECHR interpret the treaty more sensibly, so there's nothing stopping us. Now that the elites are growing increasingly more aware of the failure of the multicultural project, Trump's recent UN address is good evidence of this. Because power is top-down, this is more likely to work, as signaling from the more sensible elites and that of the world's most powerful nation are acknowledging that migration has gone too far, and to maintain power, they must give the base they rule over something.
The other solution that may seem more practical and long-lasting is to reform the UK Human Rights Bill of 1998 itself. Despite it being the UK Human Rights Bill, it's still applicable to the ECHR rulings and is not a sovereign legal treaty. So, in this reform, the sensible parts would be kept, but crucially, the immigrant enabling parts, the right to private life and family, would fall under a parliamentary declaration to judges that when processing arrivals and potential deportees, public safety of Britons would be prioritised. Now, we're going to emphasise this public safety of Britons being prioritised thing, because if done, would give courts a lot of legroom and ability to reject asylum claims, as the term protecting public safety of Britons is ambiguous enough to essentially deny and deport whoever they want under the most limited of grounds. In this ruling, simply being Islamic could be deemed a threat to public safety, blocking anyone of an Islamic background from entering and being a loose enough term to deport someone. And before you say that's too shallow a reason, it works the other way around. Judges recently didn't deport an Albanian criminal from the country because he didn't like the chicken nuggets in Albania. Loose legal terms are a great way of allowing policy to occur. However, because of this, it's about the people in charge of the judicial system. To carry this out, pro-immigrant hardliners would have to be removed, and more loyalists sympathetic to the idea of ending the problem would have to enter positions of power. To cement this enactment of this new approach, courts would also be forced to interpret the law in a manner consistent with a parliament-stated policy of national security and reducing immigrants. Finally, the new act would also block courts from issuing declarations requiring the amendment of laws from Parliament, keeping the establishment of the law being blocked by legal petition. So either by ignoring the laws or reforming them, Britain will have achieved sovereignty and the ability to start getting serious about immigration. With sovereignty achieved, the Navy can start blocking small boats. Deportation processes can occur so much more quickly, and processes can be blocked freely. The first massive hurdle overcome, we will now explain how to fix more of the issues, though it is worth emphasizing that most all of these solutions we are providing, the first step has to be the UK achieving legal sovereignty. Without that, none of what we're about to mention would work. So remember, that is the key goal to ending the crisis.
The application of digital IDs will have been solidified or been an invaluable tool to strengthening the border. Digital ID is a way of documenting a citizen. Having one legitimizes you as a citizen. Not having one means you're outside the quote-unquote system and therefore illegitimate. It's that simple. Without wanting to sound too much like Tony Blair, digital ID will have tangible benefits in stopping immigration. As mentioned, illegals are not the main issue, but removing them would hardly hurt, and it's just one means of practical application digital ID provides. Want to be involved in illegal activities that facilitate illegal immigration, digital ID helps stop that. Digital ID will not be a fix-all, and its unpopularity may even lead reform to pledge to banning it. But a sensible government would understand its value as an asset in stopping immigration flows. The government should keep it primarily as its benefits in stopping immigration would be valuable, and it would also gain them some favorability with the techno-globalists. Do we want it? No. Does it help stop immigration? Kind of. Does it buy favorability from powerful elites? Yes. And for that reason, it's part of the solution. Given the other hurdles needing to be jumped, it's crucial to not piss off the elites too much. Going along with the process of digital ID is basically a necessary sacrifice for solving the much larger issue in potential demographic replacement. Digital ID is Tony Blair's prescribed solution to the problem, so whether effective or not, it is the solution. The elites want to introduce digital ID, an unpopular policy. They know people want immigration to be stopped, so they are meshing the two policies together, making an unpopular policy popular. Therefore, power is willing to accept immigration being tackled as long as it coincides with their desire for digital ID. Fail to abide by digital ID, and the elites will throw hurdles in the way of stopping immigration to make sure that the digital ID gets introduced anyway, so it can be seen to be the solution to stopping immigration in the first place. The UK must also alter our citizenship rules and right to work. Adopting policies similar to the UAE's Jus Sanguinis principle would be a good start. If we were to mirror the UAE, our citizenship rules and right to work would look like such. In the UAE, citizenship is provided on the basis of blood, not location. Now, a UK government getting away with introducing an overtly racialized citizenship policy is unlikely. Long term, though, this needs to be introduced. So through messaging and speeches, a government should acknowledge the existence of the English ethnicity so the concept can become more mainstream.
Now, getting back to actually introducing Emirati citizenship rules, we can copy their approach on stopping the loophole of foreigners marrying passport holders to gain citizenship. To do this, we'd increase the gaining of citizenship to 7 years with children and 10 years without, making the process very long and not too dissimilar to a lot of European countries as well. The Emirati naturalization process is 30 years, just for reference. Now, a reformed UK citizenship process would not need to be that long, but can mimic the same requirements necessary in the UAE. To enter and become a citizen, one must be fluent in English, hold a clean criminal record, have a legal source of income, and a certain amount of education and a renunciation of original citizenship. This would disincentivize those coming over looking for cheap money and grant the government increased flexibility in its ability to deport. As put simply, new arrivals would have to wait years to earn citizenship and gain the legal rights to block their deportation, whilst also stopping those that do arrive from not integrating. Now, paired with digital IDs would mean that those that are waiting, paired with digital IDs would mean those who are waiting for a job citizenship would also not be receiving welfare.
The UAE also limits political participation and access to property purchase. Given the British welfare state, it would probably be unwise to block property purchase, but barriers to political participation until citizenship being required would lend a helping hand preventing ethnic interest groups and pro-immigration political activists gaining any representation.
We're going to touch on this more later, but the UK can also massively help itself by making the country less desirable to immigrants in the first place. In this new mould, aided by digital ID, social welfare would not be granted to those arriving in the UK. This would be very popular and legally be doable, as citizenship rules would be so tight under this new premise that there would be no legal precedent to provide arrivals with taxpayer money. It would also be popular and a quick win for the government in charge. Processing centres would also not be four-star hotels. Instead, migrants would be placed in basic camps that could be built in areas far away from urban centres. Also, scrapping indefinite leave to remain will again make it less desirable, as there is no guarantee of a long-term citizenship being easily attainable. Whilst scrapping indefinite leave to remain will make it again less desirable, as there is no guarantee of long-term citizenship becoming easily attainable. So, to summarise, the UK has first departed from the legal obstacles that actually got us here in the first place. And remember, that is the crucial part. Now we are allowed more direct control of who comes in and out. A new citizenship rule has been introduced and has made it incredibly hard to leech off the system and become a valid UK citizen. And all of this is being supervised and facilitated by digital ID, giving us favour with the elites and making the system far more efficient.
By far and away, the most important thing is to deport migrants. Enough was enough a long time ago, and deportations are paramount. Having passed through the previously mentioned legal hurdles and stopping the inflow, here's how the UK can start deporting. Luckily, the UK can deport non-citizens legally. However, to legally deport an excess, scrapping indefinite leave to remain is crucial. By doing so, would allow our current figures of around 2.5 to 3 million to be deported under such means that don't require reforming the law. This is also partly why the sooner reform gets in, the better. As more time passes, more immigrants become citizens. Whether it be in a couple of years or not, scrapping indefinite leave to remain is the best scenario to carry out deportations. But how will they go about doing this? Presuming the process starts now or later, the target should be for round-the-clock deportations. We'll be using current figures for this calculation, but remember, the same framework can be used to all those that are non-citizen But remember, the same framework can be used to all of those that are non-citizens in government that come in the next 5 years down the line.
So what we're going to do now is lay out a sort of process of what would occur if we were to start deporting everyone that was an illegal citizen. This we can't guarantee would work, but we can't guarantee wouldn't work either, if that makes sense. This is essentially more of an exercise to show you what the process would look like, and you can essentially make your own judgment of whether this would be feasible or not. So we're going to lay out the current figures, working under the assumption that the UK has granted an emergency contract to the issue of deportation. And we're going to give you the sort of numbers and logistics that it would take to carry this out. So working with current figures, a large chunk of the Boris wave could be removed. The aim and messaging of this plan that we're laying out in this hypothetical would be to get 500,000 deportations a year. Starting off, the labour and logistical planning of this large-scale project would have to be placed under a large command structure. The government would probably create a new branch to deal with this, and it would be centralized there. The first step would then also be issuing cases. To remove an immigrant, a caseworker is required to essentially get them out. The first step, this would mean enlarging the amount of caseworkers in the Home Office. As presumably it takes a caseworker 1 day to remove a migrant, it would require 400 new workers on the current 2,100, as well as more to cover up for those that have been vetted as pro-immigrant. And let's be honest, there probably will be quite a lot of them.
5,000 escorts will then be needed to physically carry out the deportations alongside detention centres. The detention centres would be debatable in their level of accommodation. All in all, around 41,000 to 50,000 beds would be needed alongside other basic facilities. They can either be placed back in hotels, though this would be preferably avoided, or more preferably in the large-scale detention centres established to process arrivals. Also, 9 to 11 planes would have to be chartered daily. The military could help in this matter as well, though the prospect of staying in a detention centre may prompt some to just pay for their own flight anyway. To accommodate these logistical and labour requirements, emergency contracts would be initiated to streamline construction and recruitment. Additionally, a data cleanup and identification of desired deportees would begin being conducted. This would probably take as long as 18 months to get fully operational, but after completion would see the beginning of the mass deportations with a desired 1,370 to 1,644 daily deportations occurring.
Now that we've broken down a lot of numbers for this, let's think about some other policies that would have to occur in this. There would, of course, be opposition, but I think we can pretty much assume that there would be a majority favourability for it. However, to minimise initial outrage, the first group that would be deported would be criminals. This is an easy political win and very logical as well. Then they would be followed by single adults and finally by families. It would be hoped that the initial popularity of the first deportation groups being removed would embolden the government to also consider deporting families and at least legitimise the idea of it to people. The few working in critical services would also go into the third group. Now, this sounds great and is applicable, though it must be emphasised that the numbers gaining citizenship each year are going up and up. Because of this, deportations may be lower than mentioned later down the line. And of course, as well, it depends on the amount of money the government's actually willing to invest in this. As you can see here on the screen, it's going to cost a lot of money and a lot of man-hours. So the scale of it is dependable on the government. But what we've hopefully at least laid out to you here is that it is feasible. COVID would have cost far more money, and we've done far bigger and challenging things as a country. So essentially, whatever frame you believe is realistic, apply that to the methods we've laid out here, and that can be what you view as a realistic deportation policy. However, the key thing to emphasize is the sooner the policy is introduced, the better.
What we have laid out up to now would see a drastic change in Britain. Arrivals will have significantly decreased and deportations will have occurred. A mistake would be to think that the job ends there. The next step would be to covertly establish a hostile environment to immigrants to both deter people from wanting to come and creating some voluntary remigration. It's important to note that these policies come far below stopping entrance and deportations in the order of needing to be done. But they can be carried out at various points to gain quick political wins while also carrying out solutions. We have a lot, so we're going to go through them quite quickly. Firstly, would be banning the halal and kosher meat. Many already see the process as unethical, so support would exist there. It would make life harder for Muslims in Britain. It wouldn't necessarily be a motivation for them to leave, because many Muslims are hard-headed and would probably switch to a vegetarian diet and would probably switch to a vegetarian diet as they would see it that it was righteous and close to martyrdom to make that sacrifice. It would, however, affect Islamic businesses, particularly the over 800 halal butchers and thousands of halal restaurants. It would also mean that Eid al-Adha, which is basically Christmas for Muslims, could not be celebrated in the UK, significantly reducing the appeal of moving to the UK for a serious Muslim. Realistically, most Muslims in Britain are here for the economic benefits, they're not here because of piety. But the process would be a small win in reducing the numbers. An exodus wouldn't arise, but a statement would be clearly made.
The reason for being in Britain for migrants is next. Now, first and foremost, many are here to send remittances back home. Now, banning remittances outright would be impractical, but the government could introduce measures to elongate the process and make it harder for low-income migrants to remit money. This policy would see British payment providers ordered to levy a percentage of remittance payments to HMRC. In simple terms, a tax on remittance. It would also see a scrutiny on small-scale payments, increasing and elongating the process of sending money home, making it a lot harder for low-income migrants to send money back. Long bureaucratic processes are a skill in modern-day Britain, after all, and if done inconveniently enough, could almost make it impossible for older generations to remit. There would also be a minimum threshold on foreign sending to stunt low-income migrants. Now, backdoors would obviously occur, but like the porn ban, a general decrease would also occur. and the government would be signalling an unwelcoming tent. We must emphasize that this is to deter low-income payments and not mess with banking and capital sectors, but just to scrutinize the guy working in a butcher shop sending money back to Bangladesh. That's the target.
I personally know quite a lot of dual passport holders, and being given a cash incentive to go back home, especially bear in mind at this point, if let's say they're a pious Muslim, they can't celebrate Eid, they can't get halal meat, and so being able to set a base back home with money that the government gave them for free would definitely be an option they would go for. And again, this isn't going to go for everybody. Not everybody's going to go, yes, I would love this, but it's going to be for those who already potentially want to remigrate, to just give them that extra push. And to be honest with you, it's more people than you think. We can also take a leaf out of Denmark's book in dispersing areas that have become heavily populated by migrants. The government would designate specific areas to strategically break up, probably best done towards heavily Islamic areas. These areas would be forced to contain a maximum of 40% social housing, with residents of a migrant background forced to move elsewhere to break down the ethnic enclaves.
We would then encourage natives to move back into these areas by increasing policing. And of course, these are in city locations, so they're prime locations for people to move into anyway. These areas would then also come under strict rules regarding the display of foreign flags and languages. Now, by dispersing migrants away from these ethnic communities and out of the major cities, it could be a good way to incentivize remigration, as you're now no longer in these big economic areas surrounded by people of your own culture, and it's also going to force them to integrate massively.
And don't forget, at this point, you require digital ID to get a job, and you require citizenship or a certain visa to get a digital ID in the first place. So the process, which is currently way too easy, as many get a cash-only or unregistered jobs, would be completely overhauled to stop anyone coming in from having access to any sort of money, any sort of income. Therefore, the job market in the UK, from an outsider's perspective, would be impenetrable, or at least not worth the effort of going through. So the guy making 200 quid a day on a funfair game in the streets of London, or the guy that came in, was able to get an e-scooter or an e-bike to do Uber every day for 100, that would be impossible for them, as these companies or the police would be able to check if these people have a digital ID. And if they don't, well, go back to what we spoke about earlier. They're getting deported, legally and easily.
Finally, more of a funnier one we thought of, but could be effective, is to create an advertising strategy in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia to deter migrants from coming to the UK. Think that Andrew Tate model 3 years ago, where he was paying people to make content supporting his business. We do something similar, with people paying creators to make content devaluing the idea of coming to the UK in the first place. Picture a guy in India thinking of moving away, and he gets an Instagram reel where it's just saying he gets an Instagram reel just saying the UK is strict and he can't get in. Or a guy walking through the streets of Lagos seeing a big billboard saying, "Don't come to the UK." Look, this isn't going to deter everyone. People aren't idiots, but, well, a lot of them are. They're not going to now come in. More sinisterly, this same content machine could also create videos advertising other Western nations as ideal destinations. Don't come to England, it's strict, you get no money. Go to France, I found a wife, I got money from the government. Again, it's not going to change everything, but it's just another part of the jigsaw. So, hopefully, in this video, we will have laid out a couple of solutions. Some you may not have thought of, and some that you might have thought about, but not really known how they would have come about. We hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'd love to actually read some of the solutions you might have put in the comments. Logically test them out and see if they would hold up in this current framework. It's not as simple, of course, as saying, get them out. If you like this video, please subscribe, please like, and look forward to other content. Our aim going forward for this channel is to make content that doesn't necessarily react to events, but looks into concepts and themes more deeply. The news cycle is just too ephemeral today, thus providing you, the viewer, a better framework to then view the world so you can bypass the slop and see real change in the minute details of things. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon.